Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story.
Life takes you to unexpected places, and you meet unexpected people. It is a saying that is true for most people. For one guy, it was even more true. His name was Peter, and his unexpected story started in the early 90s. That time was at the forefront of digitalization. CD and DVD were invented, but people still used cassettes and VHS. The internet was a thing contained chiefly at universities. Peter was 21 and lived in a small town on the coast that lived off its fishing industry. He hated everything about fishing. He hated the smell, the ocean, the fishing boats, and the backbreaking work in the canning factory. He had nearly flunked out of high school. Luckily, a student counselor talked him into continuing. She spent much effort in motivating him. Peter complained to her that he hated the miserable town in general and fishing in particular. He loathed the idea of becoming a fisherman. She made a deal with him. If he finished high school, she would get him a position as an apprentice plumber. She said that if he kept his end of the deal, he would never have to set foot on a fishing boat. He accepted the deal and tried his best to manage. Peter was tall, with a decent muscular body. Most girls will say that he is handsome, not pretty or hot, but pretty. He was keenly interested in girls, like most boys of that age. He got a girlfriend. She was short, cute, and just as inexperienced as he was. Together they learned what it's like to be with a person of the opposite sex. It was exciting, but often they hung around. They spent their first time together in the back seat of Peter's dad's car. Peter didn't know what to do and barely put on his protection. It was all over in 5 minutes. Peter could tell she was unhappy afterwards. They repeated this several times, but did not improve. Soon they broke up. Peter has a second girlfriend. Her name was Denise, and she was far more experienced in communication than he was. Peter knew that she had been friends with several boys, but she had never told him how many. She liked to do it in the car, but talked him into skipping school after lunch. Together they will go home to her. Her parents were at work and spent time in her bedroom. Peter was surprised at how excited she could be, and she wasn't shy about telling him how much she wanted it. They spent many days together, and she taught him many things. One day, he was called to the student counselor's office. She was upset with him for skipping classes. She accused him of breaking their agreement. She was agitated and nearly shouting at him. Peter was surprised at how angry she seemed to be. Only later in life did he understand that she sincerely cared about her students and wished them to succeed. She said he would drop out of high school if he continued the way he was doing before. She said she saw him with Denise and could understand the temptation to skip class to be with her. She then shocked Peter when she said he needed to find time outside of school hours to spend time with Denise. He could never imagine that she could express herself like that to a student. She said he should stop if he wanted to have any other choice but to become a fisherman. Peter believed the student counselor. He had also seen how his grades were slipping. It did not go down well with Denise when he said they had to settle for the car in the evenings. She broke up with him the next day. He saw Denise leave school at lunchtime the following week with another guy. He had mixed feelings about it, but his gut told him he had made the right decision. Things turned out for the better, and he graduated from high school. He got the position as an apprentice plumber with the student counselor's help. He was eternally thankful to her after that. The following month, he moved out when he got his first salary. He could not stand his parents. His father was a fisherman and could not understand why he did not want to become the same. He was 45 but looked 65 with a broken body from the harsh ocean and hard work. His mother was a housewife and closet alcoholic. She was most days in a hazy alcohol-induced fog from morning till evening, and Peter hated it. Petro settled with 4 friends in a 3-room apartment. It was crowded but cheap. All of them were happy to leave their parents' homes. They had a great time together. They often walked together. From time to time, they rented adult movies from a nearby store and watched them together. Back then, there was no internet, and access to such images was limited to magazines and movies on VCR. None of the boys were financially secure, and they spent money on movies. Peter usually went to the store to rent movies. He was there often enough to get to know the owner, Wesley, who was in his late 50s. However, it was hard to tell with his chubby, freckled face and limp body. Peter had never seen him wearing anything other than jeans, a white t-shirt that was perpetually dirty, and an unbuttoned flannel shirt. He was the epitome of a careless shopkeeper. One time, Peter complained to Wesley that money was tight on an apprentice plumber's salary. Wesley readily offered to lend him a $50. He could pay him back the following week after getting his salary. He wanted steep interest, but Peter felt it was manageable. Not until later did Peter understand how Wesley had successfully played him. Over the following months, the 50 turned into 100, then 200, and even more until Peter couldn't pay him back. They had a serious argument when Peter wanted to pay Wesley back a reasonable amount without interest. After a heated argument, Wesley offered Peter to take part in an amateur adult film as payment. Peter thought that was a funny idea. He was not a movie star. Wesley said that's the beauty of amateur film, you don't have to be the star. They argued more, and Peter said he didn't want people to see him in the movie. Wesley said that wouldn't happen. It was part of a chain of adult stores that sold amateur movies. He would send the film to the other side of the country. Wesley responded with objection after objection. Finally, Peter said that he didn't have a girlfriend to spend time with. Wesley smiled evilly and said that he had the perfect girl in the same position as Peter. Peter said he needed to think about it and left. He was in a mess. Wesley demanded money that he did not have. The idea of performing on camera felt more and more appealing. It was an easy way out of his predicament. A few days later, he called Wesley, who was more than pleased to hear Peter's decision. A few days later, Wesley called back and said everything was fixed. Peter has to come to the store the next evening at closing time. Peter was nervous and could hardly concentrate on work. At home, he took a shower and got ready for the evening. He came to the store at the appointed time and was surprised to see a woman in her 40s with Wesley. He didn't think much about who he would perform with, but he took it for granted that it would be someone his own age. Wesley introduced her as Kiera. Kiera acted very tense and was hostile toward Wesley. Peter agreed with Wesley that she was great. Wesley exclaimed in approval as he caught the whole thing on camera. Kiera was tight, no wonder. They didn't know each other, and both were actually forced into it. Wesley sensed it was time to move on and ordered them to switch places. Peter and Kiera realized the artificial situation as they did as they were told. It was not a natural communication. It was something else that neither Peter nor Kiera knew. They switched places with clumsy movements. Peter sat on the bed and propped himself up on his elbows while Kiera lowered herself down. Their eyes met, but Peter couldn't tell what Kiera was thinking or feeling from her face. She blushed faintly, so he assumed he had reached her at least a little. "Come on," Wesley ordered. "Do it." As Kiera began, her eyes widened as Petro took a full look. He could tell she was shocked by what she saw. Peter saw that she was wearing an expensive-looking wedding ring. She talked about her husband owing Wesley money, but Peter was too nervous to realize that she was married and now cheating. He wondered where her husband was. She said he was a fisherman. It was hard work, and they were usually at sea for 4 or 5 days at a time. Being married to a fisherman meant a lot of time alone at home. She began to please Peter. He followed her engagement ring up and down. "Well, on to the next stage," Wesley said impatiently after a while. "I can't," Kiera replied. Wesley sighed theatrically. "Stop arguing and get down to business." He did it without complaining, didn't he? No. "We've been through this. Either do as you are told or get the hell out of here and return with my money." Wesley sounded upset. Kiera didn't answer but looked upset but complied. "Yay, that's it, baby." Wesley encouraged her, moving closer with the camera. Peter did not have much experience in this kind of communication. His first girlfriend didn't do much. Denise wanted more to be pleased. She patiently taught him how to do it. He used this knowledge on Kiera, and it worked well considering the circumstances. Kiera was far from a novice, and she soon had him enjoying himself. She did even more without being asked. Wesley moved around, filming it all and making encouraging comments. Eventually, Wesley said it was enough and that they should move on. "I want you at the bottom," he ordered Kiera. Peter was breathing heavily. He stood up, making room for Kiera on the bed. Instead of lying down, she picked up her purse and rummaged through it. She raised her defense. "Why is this?" Wesley asked. "I want him to use rubber." Kiera replied, "No." Wesley replied, "I don't want to communicate without protection." Kiera answered stubbornly, "You are unlucky. It will ruin the movie. You must be defenseless." Wesley insisted, "It's not a good time of the month." Peter vaguely knew how it worked with a woman. He knew that she could get pregnant during intimate intercourse. He also knew that there was a cycle to it, and some days were more likely than others. Kiera must have told Wesley that today wasn't a good day for that. Wesley snorted, "It's easy. We'll get to it. It will be great." He examined her from head to toe. Peter was surprised when she didn't protest his rude demand. Instead, she bit her tongue with an angry expression. With a disappointed expression on her face, she dropped her defense. Then she stood in front of them wearing only high-heeled Shoes, go ahead, Wesley called out. Peter could do nothing but agree. Even though she was much older, she looked beautiful. He couldn't stop noticing the age difference. He tried to imagine what she was like at his age. Kiera, you have one hell of a lucky husband being married to you, Wesley said admiringly. My luck is that he has a gambling problem, so I get to work with you. Peter believed Wesley was a creep, but he was overdoing it in how he trash-talked Kiera's husband. She blushed at the comments, but she did not reply. Well, we don't have all night. Get on the bed so we can continue, Wesley continued, not caring how he humiliated her. Kiera was stiff as she went to the bed and lay down on her back. Let's start like this and then move on to other options. Wesley walked over to the bed with his camera, ready to record everything. Peter looked at Kiera. She looked flushed but unhappy. He tried to relax her. It seemed to work, and after a while he was pressed against her. Wesley was kneeling beside them. He almost shoved the camera between them to capture them starting. She looked up into his face with an angry expression. If you come in me, I will break every bone in your body. Oh, she said as they started hanging out. She looked up into his face with an almost pleading expression, painful and excited at the same time. Peter felt a surge of strength. Kiera was older, married, and good-looking. He met her less than an hour ago, and now they are spending time together. Looking at her face below him, he felt an irrational urge to humiliate her like Wesley had done. Perhaps your husband does not satisfy you. Her eyes widened in surprise at the cruel comment and then narrowed in anger. I don't want to hear another word out of your mouth about my husband. She shut at him vehemently. He regretted what he had said. Usually he was a nice guy and tried to be kind to others. Sorry, that was mean, he apologized. Well, get started. I want this over and done with so we can go home and forget about this ever happening. She urged him. They started doing it. It seemed that it was whimsical and artificial. Having Wesley lying on the bed trying to capture the action from all camera angles didn't help matters. Peter watched a lot of movies. Sometimes he dreamed that being a star was glamorous. You were surrounded by beautiful girls and had every interaction imaginable. And to top it all off, you got paid for it. What he and Kiera were doing had nothing to do with it. There were no feelings or emotions. The feeling of closeness and shared excitement when you communicate with the woman you love was missing. Peter could tell by the look on Kiera's face that she felt the same way. What they did was completely mechanical. It got a little better when Wesley ordered them to switch places. Kiera was not used to such circumstances. She seemed to relax as she began to take control, but it was all mechanical. He could tell she felt the same way. They changed again. She made a sound for the first time. It was also the first time they worked together. It was more lively. Wesley cheered them on and said they looked great together as he caught the whole thing on camera. Wesley told them they were doing great as he circled them on the bed on his knees. He told Peter to hit Kiera, which he did. He repeated the slap a few more times, and he thought Kiera liked it. Yes, that's it, Peter, good job. I know there's a bad girl hiding somewhere inside that pristine exterior. Over time, we will bring her out, you'll see. Peter felt Kiera shudder at Wesley's comment, but didn't object to it. Peter slapped her again, and she shivered even more. He learned to do it in such a way as to get the best answer. That's all for now, Wesley interrupted. Kiera, get up, Peter, try to finish. Both were surprised by the sudden change, but Kiera obediently followed the order. Remember, she said to Peter, looking intently into his eyes, you absolutely cannot miss. This is the worst day of the month. You have to control yourself. There was a clock on the wall in front of Peter. He was surprised to see that it had been over an hour since they had started. They continued to spend time. He knew what they expected of him. He stood over her on outstretched arms. She held onto his hands for support. Wesley was sitting next to them on the bed. He did not shoot, but prepared. You know what to do when you're ready. It will be great, Wesley exclaimed. Both Kiera and Wesley could tell when he got close. Kiera tensed, remember. She warned him, don't miss. Wesley started filming again. Kiera tensed harder, her nails digging into his hands. He did everything right at the last second. Kiera let out a loud breath of relief. He enjoyed it. Oh, my God, Kiera exclaimed, looking down with wide eyes at the mess Peter was making on her. You really saved money on this one. Wesley exclaimed, You should thank me, Kiera, for responding to your defense. He smiled at his unpleasant joke. Kiera didn't answer, but propped herself up on her elbows to look at the mess Peter had made of her. Peter was also watching. It was one of the greatest pleasures ever. He didn't know if he should be proud. Wesley, of course, was impressed, but it was a purely mechanical conclusion. A gloom came over him. He was unnaturally communicating with Kiera. There was no intimacy or interaction between them. Neither he nor she wanted to be there at first. Wesley forced them to perform on camera as an alternative way to pay back the debts. In the case of Kiera, it was even less so. It was her husband's debt that she was trying to get rid of. Self-hatred lurked around the corner after his satisfaction. Kiera stared at the dirt on herself. He could tell from her stunned expression that she felt the same feelings as he did. He assumed he would be dating a girl his own age, and he wasn't ready to meet someone the same age as Kiera. It struck him for the first time that she could be so unprepared to meet someone so young as him. "Come on, guys," Wesley said cheerfully while attaching the camera to the tripod. "Wrap it up so we can go home. Is there a bathroom?" Kiera asked. Wesley grinned evilly at her. "Sorry, honey, the lock jammed and can't be opened." Kiera glared at him. She seemed to only half believe him. When he didn't say anything else, she got up from the bed. She hurried to her purse. She was still wearing her high heels. She knelt down and took out a pack of tissues from her bag. She frowned when she saw only a handful of tissues. They were not enough. She looked at the mess, clearly displeased. Sighing, she picked up her clothes and dried herself with them. Wesley had shamelessly watched her vain attempt to clean up. Peter had also watched her, but he had done it more covertly while he dressed. "Are you getting dressed?" Wesley asked her sarcastically. She looked at him darkly again, but did not answer. Instead, she angrily began to dress. "Well, let's go," she said to them impatiently as she picked up her bag. Peter realized that he and Wesley were standing still, watching her while she dressed. Wesley took the lead, walking through the closed store to the front door. Kiera was second, and Peter was last. As he walked behind Kiera in the dark store, he could smell her scent. She would be in trouble if her husband was at home and had any sense of smell. But he doubted that Kiera had come to the shop unless he was at sea. Wesley was talking while they navigated around shelves in the darkness. "You two did rather well for being the first time," he said. It was the first time he said something positive to them instead of insulting or giving orders. "We'll meet back here next week at the same time and make a new movie." He turned and gave Kiera a sly smile. "Then you can safely experiment. It will be impressive if you perform like you did today. Boys love this amateur video." Kiera mumbled something, but it was too quiet for Peter to make out. Wesley was not dismayed and continued. "Take some unusual clothes as well. You have a great look. We should use it." "Maybe a party dress." Peter felt his ears burn. Wesley was so trivial and crude. Soon they were outside, and Wesley locked up the shop. "Well, see you next week," he said cheerfully. He began walking down the street. Peter and Kiera were left standing outside the dark shop and looking at each other. They were strangers and had just spent time together. Kiera smelled and her hair was dirty. Peter felt unreal, as if in a dream. He had no idea what to say to her. They stood looking at each other. "Thank you," she said quietly after a long while. Peter was surprised. Why? For not being as bad as Wesley. Peter looked at her. It must have been tough for her to agree to Wesley's demand to make movies. Peter could imagine he had pressured her a lot harder than him. She mostly had been stiff and mechanical while they made the movie. Peter felt sorry for her. She was stuck in Wesley's clutches as much as he was. "I'm sorry about your husband." "I shouldn't have said that about him," Peter apologized. "Let's just forget about it," Kiera said with a grim smile. Something about her answer made him feel that he had guessed correctly about her husband. They were quiet again. "I guess you and I are in this together now," Peter suggested. "Yes," Kiera replied. "Wesley is a bad person," she added with a lot of emotion. "Couldn't agree more," Peter replied. Kiera looked at him like she was evaluating him. "Do you like me?" she asked directly, and Peter blushed. "Yeah, you're pretty," he admitted. "I have the perfect dress with a beautiful neckline." "You will like it?" Peter blushed more. "Seriously, I'll wear it for you, not Wesley." "Thanks, I will try and bring something nice as well for you," Peter replied. "No, you don't have to bring anything. Just be a decent guy." "I will appreciate it." He looked at her. The hostility she had shown when they had first met was gone. Instead, she looked vulnerable. They were hanging out moments ago, but they were strangers, standing together outside the closed, dark shop. He felt that they were connected. He touched her hand. "I will look forward to seeing you in that dress," he said with a smile. "Until next week." She smiled back at him. She showed a perfect line of white teeth. With a start, he realized it was the first time he had seen her smile. She turned around and walked down the street in the opposite direction of Wesley. Peter looked after her until she disappeared around a corner. Then he started making his way home.